You ever give away your last $2 to a stranger and not know that those $2 will rearrange your whole life? That's how my story begins. A cold bus stop, rain like a curtain, and me handing over the last cash in my pocket to a woman who called me filthy, walked away and 6 months later would stand in a courtroom holding the key to my family's future and its undoing. My name is Eli Walker. I'm 38, and for a long stretch of life I was the one people looked past. Janitor at a skyscraper firm by day, cleaner at a luxury hotel by night, trying to stitch together rent meds and the kind of small luxuries that keep people human. My mother Ruth was losing pieces of herself to memory, the pills stacked like tiny monuments on her nightstand, and my little sister Maya was behind a glass wall in a prison she didn't belong in, serving time for standing up to a rich kid. I used to be a paramedic. That was the part that mattered most to me once, until I tried to report malpractice and the system chewed me up, revoked my license, and spat me back onto life's margins. That night at the bus stop, she was crying mascara down both cheeks' designer coat, the kind of look that tells 100 private truths. I asked if she was okay. She recoiled, spat a racial slur like it was a cure-all, and told me to keep my black hands off her bench. I didn't say much, just reached into my pocket for the $2 bill folded there like a paper heartbeat. "It's a long walk in this rain," I said, and when she laughed and shoved the money back in my face, I tucked it into her hand and walked 4 miles home because that was what I had. You think that's the end of it? A small act? A quick sting? But that $2 exchange became a thread that pulled on everything. Act 1. Closes when life lays out its choices. My mother needs memory care that costs more than 3 months of my wages. An appeal letter arrives saying Maya might get a shot if I can find $15,000 for a good lawyer, and the universe seems to whisper, pick one. Pick a child or a mother. I put my head down and do the only thing I know how to do: work. Mop lines that disappear under polished floors, wipe fingerprints off silverware, be invisible so the rich can feel comfortable being seen. My dad used to say, integrity isn't what you do when people watch, it's what you do when they don't. I held on to that like a lifeline. Act 2 begins when the rich world collides with mine in a way I couldn't predict. At a charity gala cleaning shift, I find a girl hiding in a bathroom. Terrified dress, ruined whispering about being forced into a safe room. Her name is Lila, and her eyes are old with fear. She presses $23 into my hand and disappears. Later, I learn Lila is the granddaughter of the woman at the bus stop, Judge Veronica Hale. 3 days after that gala, a woman in a coat that cost more than my yearly rent shows up on my hallway landing. Veronica Hale, not the screaming stranger from the stop, but an older, hollow version of power, asks to come in. My first instinct is to slam the door, but something in her eyes stops me. She sits at my kitchen table, hands trembling, and starts to tell the truth. Her son, Colin Hale, runs a private healthcare chain called Crestwell Health, and he has been building a system that turns patients into profit silences, whistleblowers, and pressures judges, including her, to sign rulings that protect his empire. When her voice breaks, she says the words that will change everything. She signed the transfer papers that put my sister in maximum security because Colin had leverage over her. He had recordings. He had papers showing how she'd compromised before, and he promised ruin if she didn't comply. You probably feel what I felt. Rage, betrayal, something cold forming in your gut. I wanted to hate her, to shout, to rip the envelope of paper off her table and burn it. Instead, she handed me a check for $15,000 to hire a lawyer, and she warned me, Colin is dangerous. Grace, that's Lila's actual name, knows things that get people hurt. This is the moment the story turns from private survival to a fight for truth. Craig Hale. Colin's son is the one who brings the rest to the table. He's younger than his swagger suggests, tired of the family's machine, and he slides a folder full of dirty ledgers across the diner table where we meet. Shell companies falsified bills, patients kept on the books for profit, and worse, deaths smoothed over with paperwork. On page after page are the names of people crushed when they asked questions. Page 63 is Maya's case. It wasn't a mistake, it was a message. We start to stitch together a strategy. Evidence, federal eyes, witnesses willing to break a family code. It's dangerous, messy, and the kind of thing that makes you swallow hard before you say yes. Then they frame me. A flash drive appears in my locker, financial, supposedly stolen fingerprints fused to an act I didn't commit. I'm sitting in an interrogation room with a detective who thinks the rich man's story is easier to believe than the janitor's, and my bail is set to a number that feels biblical. For 3 days, I kill time in a holding cell where men tell similar tales. I found irregularities, one says, and then my life disappeared. There's a rhythm there, the pattern of power protecting itself. Hope slips in weird ways. Craig uses money his father can't trace to get me out, whispering, "Testify. Tell the truth. Make her see." Lila sends me files from a hiding place, recordings of nurses' ledgers that look like crimes. Veronica, the judge who once scorned me, finally decides to do the thing she should have done years ago: put truth above self-preservation. That moment is both small and seismic. A woman who spent decades telling herself she had no choice now decides she does, and that decision echoes. Act 3 is courtroom fire. The prosecution opens with a confident stack of evidence, Colin, sitting in the front row like a man who's never lost. Then Veronica walks in plain, no jewelry, no robe, and asks to testify for the defense. She tells the court she was bullied, blackmailed, told to rule a certain way to protect her family's name, and when she sits down, she takes the fabric of her life and sets it alight. Cameras tilt in. The FBI bursts in. Colin Hale is arrested, cuffed, dragged out, not dramatically, but with the terrible finality that comes when a machine finally gets jammed. We pour out the evidence, witness after witness, ledgers, recordings, and I tell my story in a voice that stops being small. I speak about the patient death I reported as a paramedic, the certification revoked, the sister punished for daring to stand up the nights of calls through a glass booth where I told Maya, "Hold on, it isn't revenge, it's accountability." Charges that hung over me like a storm are dropped with prejudice. Crestwell, health is exposed, and people who were used for profits get reparations that will never fix the time stolen, but will give them a chance to move forward. When Maya walks out of the prison gate thinner and older, but still fierce as hell, there's a moment I dreamed of in late-night supply closets and on lonely bus rides. She runs and hits me with everything she has. We cry ugly, relieved tears in the sun, and it changes something in me that nothing else could. My mother moves into a place where the staff know her name, where the garden smells like life, not antiseptic, and the board that once stripped my credentials reinstates me with an apology letter that reads like a small kind of justice. But here's what I want you to sit with. This is not a neat fairy tale. The victory is loud and public, sure, but the wounds run deep. Families were broken. The arrogance of power left scars on people who can't simply recover. And even when the law catches up, the social ledger doesn't balance overnight. Veronica Hale didn't walk out of that courthouse triumphant. She walked out relieved and ruined, forced to reckon with what she'd done. I don't pretend the scales are even. So I leave you with this. Kindness sometimes costs you everything, and sometimes it costs you nothing but 2 crumpled bills, but it can still change the course of someone's life. The question is bigger. When people in power break the rules, who makes them pay, and who gets to say when redemption is enough? Is one confession from a once powerful judge enough to untangle decades of harm should money ever buy justice? On either side. Tell me what you think. If this story landed for you, if it made you angry, hopeful, or unsure, comment below. Tell me a time when you saw someone written off and chose to help, or when the system failed someone you loved. Debate me. Was Veronica's confession enough, or did it let people off too easy? Share this with someone who needs to believe that small acts matter, and subscribe if you want more true stories that don't tidy up the edges. What would you have done with $2 and a bus stop? Would you hand them over or walk away?